Hey, poetic ones. We are starting our unit on poetry, and we're going to walk through it pretty slowly. I'm going to think out loud as we analyze poems, and I'm going to show you an acceptable way to do that. If you hate poetry, if you love poetry, this unit is about writing about poetry, and then it will be about writing your own poetry. So let's see what's going on. So this is Unit 4. You've made it to Unit 4. Thanksgiving is coming. It's almost here. You get 9 days off, including the weekends. That's brilliant. So, under reference materials, I have terms that you'll need to know to write well about poetry. I have what we call a capstone chart. I invented something and Parham made it better. This is his bettering of I called it scam tone, but that had kind of a negative connotation. So he changed it to capstone. And it's the same stuff, but it's a decent way to analyze poetry. It's a tool. And then I've got the instructional slideshow for poetry. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to head out of the reference materials. And I want you to think, what do you hate about poetry? And what do you love about poetry? And I'm going to ask you to go to this link and tell me, how do you feel about poetry? I want you to remember when you get the sad face, go to the square with an arrow in it. So when you do this, grab you a sticky note, and I want you to tell me one thing you hate about poetry and one thing you love. You don't have to put your name on it. Just put it up here, and I will try to work around the things you hate, and I'll try to hit the things you love and try to change the things you hate. So that's your first step into this adventure. The next thing you're going to do is we're going to walk through the stuff from today, Monday, November the 16th. We're going to look at an introduction to poetry. Since poetry is all about words, diction, which is the precise and intentional choice of words, and how it's used to create tone, really reveal meanings of poems. And so what I'm going to do is walk you through a think aloud with a poem called Introduction to Poetry by Billy Collins. We're going to notice things. That's all we're going to do is notice things. So this is how I would do it if I were you. If I were seeing a poem for the first time, this is what I do. So, and I'm going to do this on a Google Doc because it's easier. So it says, I'm going to read it out loud because poetry is meant to be read out loud. I ask him to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say, drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving up the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. Well, dang. So the beating it with a hose thing really stands out to me. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to color that red because what the heck? That's a little harsh. I'm going to look again, tie the poem to a chair and torture a confession out of it. So I know in my English head that this is personification. They're looking at the poem as if it were a person. And so I'm going to write that in this area. Now, since I cannot, I have to do this thing. And so I'm going to say, poem is a living person to the speaker. The person who's saying the poem is a speaker. You can't always assume that it's the same guy that wrote the poem, Billy Collins. In this case, it probably is. But it's not always. Sometimes people put on persona and they put on disguises to talk about a subject that has nothing to do with what they've experienced. They just want to write about it. It happens, so no worries. Okay, so the other thing I notice is I've got an I and a them, and they seem to be at odds. They seem to be against each other. So, who is represented by I, and who by him? And really, it should be whom, y'all. It's a thing. Who is represented? Oh, no, it's not. Never mind. All right, whatever. Okay, so I'm looking at all these things. I love this. Hold it up to a light. Take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide. I really like that. So all I'm going to put is, I'm just going to put love this. Love this. And then he thinks a poem is like a beehive. So there's all these similes and metaphors. This is a metaphor because there's no like. This is a simile because it does have the word like. Drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out. Walk inside the poem's room and feel for a light switch. I love all these. I want him to water ski across the surface of a poem. These are great. So the ones without like are metaphors. The ones with like are similes. I notice all of them and I love them, but there seems to be a shift right here between them, they, and he, the guy that wrote this, the I and the they. There seems to be a shift. And the shift goes from positive, because these are all lovely, to negative. So in my English teacher mind, I'm going to call this the tone shift because that's what it is. So I'm going to say there's a tone shift, which can explain the I and them thing. So who is them in this poem? That's my question that I'm asking myself, self I say. Who is the them? I ask them to take a poem. Okay, it's the same thing I'm asking you to do then. I ask them to take, so the I and the them is the I and they a teacher and students? Okay, so is he complaining to other teachers that this is what they do? Or is he warning other teachers that this is what we do when we ask you to analyze poetry? I'm not sure. But I guess that depends on what you bring to the table. I, as a teacher, take it as a warning. You, as a student, would say, "Heck yes, that's what they want us to do," and you side with Mr. Collins. So, and you hear his words saying that doesn't need to be done. That we suck the fun out of every poem that you read, and that's totally possible, as we do with all literature that you read. We just suck the fun out of it. We are fun suckers. So here's the thing. When you guys are looking at this, you've got to find a meaning or a message that is universal. So mine is going to be, what do I think he's trying to tell us? I don't want to say I think, because that's not true. That's not the way it goes. The poems are living and intelligent beings that need to be treated with respect and love, not having the fun sucked out of them. Teachers, be warned. Okay. So that's how you do an analysis. You just think and notice things. Now, if you go back, this is the fun sucking part. If you go back to this reference material with the capstone chart, we answered all the questions in the chart just by noticing. It's almost like when we did the analysis of the tone for the butterfly circus and for the freak show scene. We looked at what the writer was thinking, the director was thinking, and we looked at the context that what was going on in history during that time. And we looked at the audience, and we looked at how the audience was supposed to receive each of those two scenes. And then we came up with, why would they do that? That's the message. And the speaker was the director, but in this case, it will be the person saying the poem. And then there's tone. And tone is the way the speaker, the writer, feels about the subject. Okay? This is our tool for analyzing poetry. And when you open this up, it makes a copy for you. And if you have to do more than one poem in a set, you can copy this and paste it. Let's see if we can do this. Watch Miss Hart go. Oh, hey. And I'll get another one. Because I am going to ask you to look at more than one poem, not in a day, but over a period of time. And you can turn all of these in to the poetry assignment. So that's all I've got for you today, boys and girls. Thanks so much for listening and not hating poetry, and cuss me quietly if you do, not out loud. All right, I'll see you guys later.